Oh my God, we made it to another episode of Talk Me Through Your Process.
We made it.
We made it.
Yeah, we made it.
And you got the name right.
I did. Still, you can take me to your leader if you want, but I'm glad that I was able to say it. But I have to think hard. Talk me through your process. It's a tough one. I don't know why.
Although the hashtag I love. The hashtag is easy. It's very quick. It's your process. I like it.
That's all Clough. His brain works weird like that.
Sometimes. I'm always, I just try to, what's the thing that will make the word sticky? Like, that's just all it was. Like, what would make the idea sticky? And I don't know. I use that word way too much. I use yeah and your in my tweets a lot. So that's probably how I came to that.
Well, it works.
It works. Still getting used to trying to figure out, like, when I was playing with the slow chat with the question, realizing like copy and paste can kind of crush you, because my question 3 in the actual hashtags, I had question 2. So friends, we need an intern. we need an intern and a marketing manager. So if anybody's looking for, I'll put it out there. We haven't discussed this at the executive table, but if there's anyone that would like an internship job, purely for the experience and the exposure, it's your process. Get in touch with us.
It's your process. Talk us through your process. We'll talk you through ours. And maybe, just maybe, we can get them some kombucha. If they're a male and they have a beard, we could even get them some of our special products that we've talked about in other places. And I can't really remember, but I know Ramona was grossed out.
One of them was really gross.
The rib one, right?
Yes.
I can't remember what it was called, though. Oh, well, it's all good. But we have, for
those of you not understanding the laughter, this is where we as podcasters have, we let worlds collide. So this is podcasts from other spaces, conversations from other spaces, and we get a giggle, and everybody just wonders, why is it that these three are not talking about leadership somehow?
Well, let's get to leadership. So
okay.
If it's okay with you, I have to say this is the quickest, like, in the history of podcasting for me, that we've ever had somebody viewing. So there's somebody viewing. It's not even been 3 minutes yet. So thank you to whoever's viewing. Feel free to comment or write in a question or whatever. Like, there's a new toy that Chris and I learned how to play with, where we can make the your comment pop up on the screen, and maybe that'll scare you away. Who knows? But anyway, there's some cool tools here that we could play with, and we can teach Ramona how to do that too. And then all three of us will be skilled in making comments appear on the screen. But on mine,
I got to say though, here's the thing. When that first comment comes up, like, okay, on the display right now, Ramona, what's the order of the boxes for you? So where are you on the screen?
I'm at the bottom holding the two of you up.
Okay. I love that. I love that. Yeah. And I'm like, I got one hand here and then one hand kind of holding this down. So yeah, so that's interesting. So the one thing I will say, because I noticed this when we were playing with the toy last time, we're going to have to do equal screen sharing here, because I think if we post up a comment, I think it basically does like almost billboard style, like right across Ramona.
Maybe not, but maybe we'll have to do something like this. No, that's no good. We'll figure it out. No, there's 2 people watching.
Nice.
Okay.
Would love to know who they are. So either drop something to any one of our 3 Twitter handles. So at our Chids, or at Ramona Maharg, or at Chris J. Clough, or use the hashtag your process, or just drop it right into the comments on YouTube, because that's the toy we're talking about right now.
So this week we want to talk about why me, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Why us? Who wants to start talking us through their process?
Can I light this up with something?
I'm okay with that. Yep. Ramona, are you okay if Chris lights it up?
I wish he would.
Okay. Okay. So we're going back to my PQP1, and a lot we got swept up in talking about the interview process for the process, what that can look like. And there was a lot of different students from different boards, and some people had some information, some people were just kind of wondering. But I put out to the group, and I'm curious what you two would think about this. I'm starting to have a deja vu. I already told somebody this. I don't remember who I told, but I'm going to put it out there for the cast. So within the process in York Region, there's multi-layers in the interview process. What I put to the group, and I was wondering about what's a good way to kind of distinguish the best candidate for a leadership position? So now, not just talking about, I'm not talking about leadership from the perspective of, let's say, a position of responsibility or a headship or a lead teacher, say specifically towards the admin process. So you're interviewing to be a vice principal. And I put to the group, I said, wouldn't it be interesting if part of the interview process was a sort of like a lateral analysis of your fellow candidates that have made it through to that level? So what that I don't know how, okay, there's so many hiccups with this, but here's just kind of what my brain was messing with. If there was an opportunity within the interview process, let's say there were, a handful of candidates that made it. If there was an opportunity within there for some sort of discussion about why would, if you're candidate A, why would the other 4 candidates be a valuable addition to the school board? So you might have some access to something on their CV, some of their achievements. Like, it would take some awareness of who you're actually interviewing with. And I thought to myself, I wondered how that would work. Like, I wondered if that would be a valuable way to kind of assess a couple of things. One, I think as a leader, your capacity to appreciate other leaders in the field. So that all 5 of you are interviewing for, I don't think you're ever told X number of positions. You're trying to get into a pool, but a pool of candidates that could move on. But, that would be the first layer. Like, is there a way for you to assess the sort of the value and the contribution and I guess it's the contribution level and their connection to your board. So you'd be thinking about the other 4 candidates. What is it that you know about them that you think that your school board really needs right now? And I'm wondering about within that, the people that are interviewing you would get kind of a peek at a little bit of your leadership style, a little bit of your awareness of what let's say the system improvement goals would be for the board. Because you couldn't just say, well, this person's really awesome. Well, I guess you could say this person's really awesome with tech. They've shown some pedagogical leadership there. If your board's not looking for pedagogical leadership in tech, then I don't know if there would be, you might sit there as the interviewer and say, well, okay, that's kind of cool, but maybe that's not big enough for what we're looking for. But at least you would show some awareness of what the other candidates have to offer. I think the second layer to it, so it's not just an awareness of system, not just an awareness of sort of system goals or even school goals, let's say, if you brought it down to that level, but also being able to assess how well you support other leaders in the system. So other potential leaders, are you able to speak to someone's strengths and kind of lift them up in front of you to the point where you're sort of saying they would be a really great candidate for you to hire, and here's why. Now, this would just be one of the checkpoints within the actual conversation. But as far as the why me conversation, which we'll pull apart a lot more tonight. I thought about that in the interview process. So I present that to you as just, I guess, the leap off. What your thoughts around that would be. What's the flaws? What am I not seeing here? Why would this be a terrible idea? Why is it kind of an interesting idea? What do you two think?
We'd certainly have to know a lot about the people who were all applying at that time. I mean, I don't think, maybe Rolland can speak to this better, but generally people don't all know who's in that pool. They have maybe a vague idea of people who are applying. So there's going to have to be some sharing of information for that to happen. And then do you think that everybody would be, I mean, it's a competition. So would everybody be working towards the better good, or would perhaps there be someone who in a competitive spirit uses that situation to not put someone forward or to show someone in a poor light?
The first thing I thought, you both make great points. The first thing I thought was, wow, what an interesting idea, Chris, number one. The second thing I thought was it would require a lot of vulnerability on the people, the applicants. Now, I don't know if you're talking like everybody's in the pool now, and so you're kind of building your PLN within that pool, or whether
pre-pool.
Pre-pool, then I think it's even more risky. It's riskier because there has to be some vulnerability. Number one, in my opinion. Number two, you have to kind of have an idea of these people. And I'll give you an example. When I find out every year who's in the VP pool, I make connections. I'm like, oh, wow, I've worked with that person here. I've been on a committee with this person here. And right away, when you were asking about people's strengths and how they fit in the system, my head goes right to the Catholic school leadership framework. And I'm able to make that connection because that's been one of my goals as a aspiring formal leader, has been to wrap my brain around that framework and make connections to what I'm doing at work and outside of work and how it directly connects with that framework. For me, that connection is important as a leader and an aspiring leader. So for me, I think of the people, two things. I think of, there are people who end up in the pool that I've never heard of before. So if I was sitting in a room with them, I would be asking questions about, hey, what school do you work at? What grade do you teach? Where have you worked before? Because I'm trying to make connections on where they've been, who was the leader there, do I know anybody who's worked there? And then the second thing is the people that I do know. What was really cool, Chris, about your prompt is that right away for me, I started taking names of people that I know over the past couple of years and right away being able to attach them to different pillars of the Catholic school leadership framework. You know, building relationships, improving the instructional program, securing accountability, those things, boom. I'm like, that person is that. Many of these people can fit under all those pillars, but one pillar tends to stick out more than others. And I think, wow, this is amazing. This person can totally improve the instructional program within their school and within other schools if they were to collaborate with other administrators. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but those were the connections I made right away based on what you were saying. But I would think that there would require some humility and definitely vulnerability to have those conversations. Now, I feel like I'm in a place where I'm okay to do that. So I wouldn't be totally floored if you step into a room and the superintendent's like, okay, the first part of this interview process is the 6 of you are going to go into that room and you're going to do this exercise. I kind of be like excited, like right on, okay, this might warm me up for the real interview, or this might calm me down so that I can center myself and really stick to like my values and my core beliefs around leadership and around community service and my faith formation and stuff like that. And then sit down with the formal people who are interviewing me and go from there. But I would think that for me at this point in my career and my understanding and my framework, I would kind of welcome that. I think that'd be kind of cool because I'm not there to break anybody down. I'm there to build myself up and to build other people up. So that's my position. But as Ramona said, that may not be the case. So I would say Rolland from 2006 would not be interested in that activity at all, because for me, it was more of a competition back then. Now, for me, it's not a competition. I'm competing with myself. They get in, great. I don't. Oh, well. Like, it's not about me versus them now. It was, I can say that. In the past, it was. It's not like that for me. For me, it's like I'm seeking something out in my life. I'm seeking something out in my profession. There happen to be people who are on the same journey. I don't know how they feel about me. You know, I don't know. But I would welcome a conversation with them. And I would see it as a great opportunity to learn. Like, I've reached out to a couple of administrators in my board to ask them questions about the process, and they were very open to me and very inviting. They're like, hey, you'd be great. Like, we've told you that before, but now that you're kind of more talking about it, you really should go for this because you would be an asset to the system, in our opinion. And I'm like, that's cool. I appreciate that they have nice things to say about me, and that I've kind of positively impacted them along their journey to administration. So I think it depends where you're at in your journey. I think that wouldn't be something that would be cool for someone to place on you at that moment, like a surprise. Oh, welcome everybody. You're going in there for 35 minutes. We've got some questions for you to discuss as we observe from somewhere else, and then you can come back out here and we'll start calling you in for your interview. I don't know about that, but I'm open to it. It's kind of exciting to me.
I'm open to it as well, Rolland, but I guess my concern is that not everybody's in that same spot that perhaps you are, perhaps we are. And, I just worry about a situation where, maybe they're not working for the common good. They're working towards the competition. And then when I'm sitting in that situation, I'm going to start being less vulnerable. Like if not, it's either we're all in or we're not, if that makes sense.
You know what's cool about what you just said? It would be amazing to me. And I'm with you 100%. I don't disagree at all. We're all in a different place. It would be amazing if I was sitting there and someone says to me, I'm not comfortable with this. And I would honor that. Mm-hmm. I would say to them, hey, you do you and I'm going to do me. And if you're telling me you're not comfortable, do you want me to tell me what you'd like from me? How can I assist you in making you more comfortable? If that means, Rolland, just don't ask me any questions. I don't want to do this. Okay. Or I just don't want to do this. I'm not prepared for this. That's big time risk saying that in front of other people that you're competing against. I would honor that. I would, but I'm not in that. I would just, what I would do? I'd look at them and I'd be like, that's Rolland 2006.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate. I hope that in 10 years you talk to me and you tell me that you're in a place where you can do that. Because I think, in my opinion, we need school leaders who are humble, who are vulnerable to a point. They're serving so many people. They're serving a staff, they're serving students, they're serving parents, they're serving an entire community. At least in my school board, the school is the heart of that neighborhood, that community. That's part of our mission, our vision. And so if you're going to put somebody in there that's like not ready to be like that, I don't know. They must obviously have other strengths and gifts if they're going to be promoted to that position or appointed to that position. But I just think there has to be, I don't know. I hear what you're saying, Ramona. I'm torn because I wouldn't want them to be feeling upset. This is already it's already going to be nerve wracking to sit there and to know you're going to be interviewed for a job that you'd like to have. And you don't know what they're going to ask. And even if you do know what they're going to ask, you don't know really what exactly they're looking for. So you're going to be nervous as it is. And all this is easy for me to say because I've been working on me for years, but not everybody's in that position. And don't get me wrong, I would be nervous sitting in front of them too. But I'm just at a different place. I'm in a more open, vulnerable place that I've purposely put myself into.
It makes so I can remember having a conversation with Matthew Ulrich. It was probably a couple years ago on Twitter, and we were talking about the power of quiet leadership and how that's a fluency that sometimes isn't assessed well in corporate settings and probably even in EDU settings where everyone's kind of vying for ears and eyes and bandwidth, like even as we are doing right now. So the conversation was a little bit about how do we have to sort of change the process of looking at leaders and sort of bringing leaders to the table with an understanding of what the power of quiet leadership is. Now, I didn't go so far into it with him, and maybe he'll come across this podcast. Maybe I'll get a chance to reach out to him and try to understand what the difference would be between, let's say, the typical leadership format, or whatever that brand looks like, versus what the quiet leadership would be. But if I take it just on surface level, it would strike me that that type of a let's sort of speak to in sort of like, let's say, in a public way, to somebody else's strengths or to somebody else's sort of competencies, might fall just on the edge of what sort of like quiet leadership actually is. Like, it might be pushing, and I don't know if it's as simple to say introverted versus extroverted. I think it might be a different skill set altogether. But in a space where, at least from my observation, the leaders that it's not the good leaders that demonstrate extroverted leadership skills. I won't say that, but I will say that many people that are in leadership positions have a command of that sort of extroverted energy. I don't know if I've met many that really do have that sort of like that quiet power to be able to sort of do the leadership. So,
but do you think, Chris, that we have tended to reward those extroverts more than we have the introverts in leadership positions?
Of course.
And that's why there's so many of them?
The loud white males we've said here, there's a guy that's going somewhere, right? Like, so I mean, I just had like an episode of Mad Men kind of like flow through my brain there for a second. But it's like that idea that somehow that's the template to which we're going to aspire. And that's extracting that, pulling that out of our thinking. Damn, I don't know how long that's going to take, but I think that's a strong headwind when it comes to leadership, looking towards, we're looking at sort of like that meritocracy of whoever is speaking loudest and seems to command the most attention, as opposed to noticing someone's grind, knowing someone's sort of self-regulation, noticing someone's kind of cool and calm in the face of big challenge kind of a moment.
What's interesting about that is, as soon as you said that, I started thinking about all the administrators I worked for. And the three of us have had conversations through DMs around leadership styles and certain things that in my opinion, have to happen once you become a leader that you can't exclude yourself from. And I don't even know how to talk about it here, so I'm not going to. But what I'm going to say is that as soon as you said that, Chris, I started thinking about all the administrators that I've worked for and with. And some of them were not that stand on the mountain and yell down at everybody type. And they did intrigue me, because I didn't know like where their gifts were until I sat down with them one-on-one with an issue. And then I could see the power of who they were. So some of my administrators are the louder types, and everybody knows where they stand on the issues because they have no problem just laying it out there. But then the more quiet leaders that have been open to more collaboration at the table, to say, hey, I'm not here to make the decision. Ultimately, the decision happens through me, with me, but I want to hear what you have to say. Here's kind of my position. And they don't do it in like a loud way. And then they let the staff collaborate. They let the staff discuss. They let the staff kind of break it down and do all kinds of things with it. Then at the end, they take consensus, or they thank us for our time, and that they're going to revisit this because now we've given them something to deal with. So for me, it's always interesting, because even as a young person getting into education, my first principal was not a loud principal, but she was powerful. And she had an intimidation factor because of the way she carried herself and the way she operated when she dealt with the staff. So everybody knew she's no pushover. Even though she's not going to stand at the front of the room and tell us how it's going to be, you don't mess with her. It won't work. That's not how she rolls. And that was my first view as a teacher in a classroom. Before that, it was I worked for a principal who was near the end of right at the end of his career, and he was a tall man, but he wasn't loud. and he would drop the hammer when he needed to. But we were in an adult high school, so it was a different vibe in that building, and he could easily deal with that vibe. And I heard stories about him after at being a regular high school and how he operated, and it was totally different than what I had seen in this particular context. So I think context plays a role. I also think that I find it really awesome that school board, senior administration will look at people's individual CVs and talk to their references about who they are and what they're about, and then put them in a position of leadership, even though they're not the loud white guy. But it's interesting because I think now it's 50-50. I've had both, and my preference is always going to be the person who's going to support people. And I've had loud principals who support people, and I've had very quiet principals who support people. And I've also had the opposite. I've had loud principals that don't support anybody and quiet principals that don't support anybody. So it's like along the way now I'm picking up little bits of leadership learnings from these people, and then comparing them to who I am, what I value, and whether it would help me or hinder me to not mimic that style, but to adopt the parts of it that really would work for me that I've learned along the way. I'd love to hear from the two of you about, have you done that? Have you gone shopping with your administrators to pick up, to see how styles operate, and then what fits with your value system and what you take away from those people?
Do you mean like who would we work for again, or who would we want to work for?
No, like when you worked for John Doe, you really appreciated how when you went into his office with a problem, you knew that he wasn't just going to give you a solution. He was going to empower you to come up with a bunch of different ideas to work with. And he was going to work with you to help you solve your problem, not just tell you what to do. Like, I give you that example because I once went to a principal with a situation, and he said to me, well, what do you want? What do you want to happen? And what would you do if you're sitting in my chair? Because I could easily tell you what to do. But if it's not going to work for you and the student, then what's the point? And I was like, at first I was like, whoa. But what I took from that was, depending on who he was talking to, he could say that to people. He could say, you know what? You've been doing this for a long time. You look frustrated to me. It looks like you're not in a good place. Let's get you back into that place. Tell me what you're thinking, what you're feeling. Like, his process of dealing with me, I took that with me. I grabbed that and I said, this is good. Like, this is good. I like this. It works for me. Every principal I've worked for, I've been able to take something from them that I've kind of adopted, and that one day I might use as a leader because I really liked it and it seems to fit with my perspective on leadership and dealing with people and building relationships.
I worked with a VP recently that I set up walkabout times with them, and often when I would kind of arrive and I'd have my notebook or whatever with some questions, I'd sort of walk in, and they would often, their lead would be, okay. Let me just tell you something that happened, and I'll give you as many of the details as I can, and you tell me what you think could happen. Guesses are okay. Creative ideas are okay. He said, just give it a try. And the VP did that quite often. And I appreciated that just because it allowed me to feel like no answer was wrong necessarily. I could sort of just try some stuff on and work it through. And I think that like a setup like that, which is an informal job shadowing, worked really well for me. And I have the notes afterwards. I would go and just write a few of the bits and pieces out, like stuff where the VP would say, yep, that's good. Yep, I would have thought that too. But, and then all of a sudden kind of throwing a curveball. Here's one more thing for you to consider. And usually that was the one more thing that kind of reset the whole conversation in a lot of ways. But what I appreciated about that was you still have to go through that. Okay, so what I learned through those conversations is that you still sometimes have to be able to reset sometimes, because new information can be presented, especially in the course of an investigation. And if you're sort of moving through bits and pieces of information, all of a sudden you get something that completely changes the direction of something. Well, you need to move in that direction. At least you need to kind of check it out for a little bit. So I really appreciated that. And back to what you're asking, Chids, like I I'm always watching to see how people work through challenge all the time. It's just kind of how I observe, listen, note take. And part of it is me thinking maybe I can do that. And then other times it's a little bit more, I'll say a little bit more contemplative, where I say I can't do that. And I kind of work through why I can't or why I couldn't. So it's not as aspirational. I get to see my limits and get to see how I'm different than that leader. And most times trying to find a sideways to kind of like go adjacent to how they did it. And that just has to do with the way, different ways people socialize, their different communities, their networks, their different crews, their connections, you know, whoever they might have on speed dial. Like the sort of resource bank that someone has changes how they work through any particular issue. So I'm your word shopping. I'm always window shopping. I'm always looking to see how people work through challenges that way.
It's interesting you call it shopping, because I think I would call it more absorbing what I'm seeing, what's going on, what am I taking to myself, what am I not taking. And I guess I wonder too, are there situations where when we're shopping for things we're putting back, right? The things that we don't want to be part of our practice.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. The scariest thing is to see, I don't know if either one of you have had this experience, but to see your administrator do something and agree with what the administrator's doing while you sit with your colleagues and they're all shaking their heads and they're not buying any of it. That's horrible, because then they'll say to you, "What do you think, Rolland?" And I'm like, "I know you're all pissed, but I agree with his position."
Or even, wow, that is not the call I would have made. I respect his answer and I'm going to live with that. But at the same time, sitting with your colleagues and they're ready to lynch.
Or let me add one more thing to it. Or there actually are two possibilities. But because the individual is sitting in the chair and ultimately does have to sign off on it, they just happen to pick the one that you don't pick. So it's actually, there's an and there. It's not so much just that there's an absolute. It's almost as if because the individual just committed and decided, that becomes challenging. So, you know, and again, this was what popped up a lot in these sort of like, I'll call it the job shadowing that I was doing, because so many of the stuff were it's this and this and this and this. So you don't necessarily get to say we're only going to focus just on the student success part of this, or we're just going to focus on the ESL part of this, or we're just going to focus on the equity FNMI element of it. It is all of these. Where would you like to start? We have to take all of this into consideration as we work through the decision. And you can never, even if you are deciding where you sort of like you're throwing your cards all in on, looks like you're sort of making a decision based on one element of it, be prepared that the other two could still come back around again, whatever this decision that you're making. And what's interesting is that same moment at that same table, Chids, that you were talking about, where it's like one person, where it's like you kind of agree with it. When you look around the table and you can see that each person has come to the right conclusion and they're all hoping that leader is going to pick their version of it. And you can just see that sort of like the people starting to lean in. We're going to get to an answer here, whether it's, you know, in-school team meeting or something like that. And then the whoever's at the chair, whatever, says, okay, here's the direction we're going to go, whether it's decided there or afterwards. That can be pretty challenging. But ultimately someone or a group of someone's have to make a decision to move forward, right?
Yeah, or they're making a decision that is there's going to be some fallout from it. And you know it is the right decision. It's the brave decision. It's the vulnerable decision. You're with them on it, but you know they're going to take the heat for that because they're the leader.
One of the jobs I was interviewed for, there were 3 principals interviewing me for the job. So the principal of the school was interviewing me, his vice principal, and he invited a principal from down the street, the sister school, the school that was connected, to come and interview me interview a bunch of candidates for a position. And after I got the job, every time that principal came to visit my principal, I'd always say, "Hey, how you doing?" We'd chat. And one day he found out I was interested in leadership, and he said, "Can I give you some advice?" I said, "Yeah, sure." And he was an outspoken type of individual, but almost bigger than life. Like, he was a big guy, and he had a presence. And he said to me, "I got to tell you a couple of things. If you become a principal, there's some things you need to know. Number one, when you come into work, you think you know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen." So he's like, "You just don't know. And the second thing you need to know is every day when you leave, someone's going to be upset with you and your decisions." And I was looking at him. It was one of those moments where I was looking at him, and my principal was looking at me all like, "Could you have given him some positive advice rather than what you just said?" And they laughed about it. But I took that to heart, because formal leaders make decisions, and not everybody's going to be happy with those decisions. And I've been on both ends. My principals have made decisions where I'm like skipping out of the office down the hall. And then they've made other decisions where I'm literally like not really crying, but like I'm dying inside. I'm like, "Somebody get me home. I just need to get home and end this day now." Right. So, the decision making. But I mean, part of making decisions is whether we decide to formally enter into the process of applying for a VP position. And something I've been considering, the three of us have been considering, is those stories, those tap on the shoulder stories. Have you been tapped on the shoulder for this role? If so, like, I'd love to hear your stories, because I don't think I've really ever been tapped, but I think you two may have. So I'd love to hear, maybe Ramona, you could start with, have you ever been tapped on the shoulder and been told, "Hey, you should consider formal leadership"?
Yeah, I guess there's been plenty of times over the years where they say, "Oh, you should do that. You should," like, when I first took PQE1, so that's like 2008, so like a long time ago. I took it because I was site supervisor for summer school, and they recommended that I have part 1, and so that is why I took it before summer school started. And then when you take that, of course, when you sign up to take that course, of course, your principal knows. And of course, then they say, "Oh, you would make that'd be awesome. You should totally do that." And then when it comes around to the next principal coming in, they're like, "Oh, I see you have your PQP1. You'd be great. Let's get you in here doing some tick." And I don't know that there's any one situation where that I can speak to where a principal came up and said, "You need to do this." That there's been plenty of situations where you should really be thinking about this. A few of them maybe have tried to kick me into doing it. But maybe we need to hear from Chris.
So yeah, no, it's good. I have it was kind of a surreal moment. It was actually during a TPA. And so, teachers' performance appraisal, and it was just near the tail end during the discussion point, and the administrator that was proctoring the TPA just kind of off the cuff said, have you considered the admin route? And I kind of guffawed, and it wasn't because I guess it was one of those just nervous kind of responses. I didn't have a place to put the comment. And I kind of did what I'm doing right now, a little bit of a laugh, a little bit of a thoughtful, my hands kind of come up in the air. Because at that point, it hadn't occurred to me at all that what I was doing within the classroom, or what I was doing that others could observe, would merit a statement like that. And when I said I didn't have a place to put it, I just mean that I didn't have a schema that sort of saw myself in that role. Had I done other leadership things within the school? Yes. Had I had sort of like a broad kind of portfolio of things that I had connected with? Yes, I have a lot of different interests within EDU. I hadn't sort of put that piece. Hadn't stitched that together. So yeah, I would say it was uncomfortable only because I think that I didn't see it coming. I didn't see the question coming. And there was something about it happening within the TPA process. And again, when I say within the process, it was in the wind down conversation right near the tail end. I'd already done my lesson, we had talked, we had sort of completed the paperwork. It was just in the end of the conversation. But when I think back on where I was in my teaching, it didn't seem possible that the things that I had done within school would sort of amount to a statement like that. And I think that's why I kind of laughed. To be honest, it was probably more of a giggle. And if I would look at all the different experiences that I had in the different sort of departments that I'd worked in, I've had a very kind of kaleidoscopic career in education, that I can see how the different portfolios I've been involved with and the different people I've connected with and different people within system and the board, I could see how the perception would be, well, this is someone that's looking to kind of build towards this space. I can see how that trajectory would be there. It's just funny. I never ever thought someone would say it directly to me. I never had colleagues say it to me, where they would say, oh yeah, you should go for this. So it was confusing to me when I got the tap. It was confusing. More recently, when I decided to take the PQP1, I didn't tell too many people. I did tell the administrative team at the school, and I think this is what's kind of interesting. Some of the conversations, maybe we'll get a chance to talk about the Twitter survey that I put out, but some of those conversations, there was a real kind of secrecy that sort of surrounded when people finally decided to do, that PQP1. So to give you an example, me doing the PQP1 this year, that was 8 years ago during a TPA that it was mentioned. So almost a decade later, I decided to take this course. So there was a whole lot of learning, a lot of experience, a lot of life that happened between when it was first mentioned and I was giggling like a little kid in my, my TPA, to now where I thought, yeah, I think maybe I kind of like to take that course. It's sort of, I looked at the syllabus, had talked to enough people, saw it as a purposeful next bit of professional development. So it's funny, in a lot of ways, I've thought I am interested in taking even PQP2, but I still don't know if I'm in that space where I want to become an administrator. So it could be a big waste of money. I could come out on the side like, why did I spend the money? It could be valuable PD, but it's where my curiosity lies right now. So that was my tap during the TPA process.
I have to say, I've had a really awesome administrator support me. I don't remember anybody ever tapping me on the shoulder and saying you should do this. I think over time, as I've been part of committee work and part of leadership activities, leadership programs, I think those things have kind of built my capacity in a way that I've been able to understand and to talk to administrators about leadership in that way, where they come out saying, okay, this is a place that I could see you in. And so it's not like tap, 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 you need to do this. It's more like, at this point, it's like, you should be considering this now. You should be going down this road because we think we need people that are operating and thinking like you. And the way that you run your class and the way you treat staff, those types of things. And like I told you, because I'm connecting my work and my experiences and my interests to the leadership framework, I'm always thinking it's there. It's part of my thinking process. How am I securing accountability with the staff members I collaborate with and with the parents I work with and the students I work with, right? It's like I see it with the principal lens. I see it through that lens. And then when I talk to my administrators about it, they say to me, hey, this is good stuff. You sound like, and you have the knowledge of what we're supposed to have when we come into this role. So this is a good thing for you. And in the last little bit, I've told principals when I've been interviewing for jobs, I have an interest in administration, in formal leadership. Will you support me? Will you support me along the way? And that's important for me to have them say that they would. That's important for me because I don't want to move to a school and have all the stress of that, and then to find out this principal's like, no, I'm not going to support you. I don't want you to do it, or I don't think you can, that's a whole podcast right there. People who have told you you shouldn't or you can't. when I thought that their whole job was to be supportive all the time and to help you fill in gaps that maybe they see that they think, whoa, that's a huge hole. Well, why don't you try to help me fill that hole? Like, what do I need to do? And that's the other thing too. I've heard of people say it's not about a checklist. And it's like, hold on. You're telling me I can't do it, or I shouldn't. You're telling me I've got gaps that I need to fill in. But then when I ask you what they are, you tell me, well, this isn't really a checklist. So it's like, anyway, that's a whole other conversation. But my taps have kind of come from building my capacity. So at this point in my career, based on what my 2 administrators see, they're very supportive. They believe that I should be applying to the VP pool. Like, they're like, you need to do this now. So whatever issues you have, you need to straighten them out and deal with them, because now is the time for you to apply. And I'm like, okay, like, that feels good, because I feel like I've built myself towards this. And it's not just, oh, you're a dynamo, you should do this. It's like, people have believed in me and they've said to me, I will support you. Think about this, start doing this. I've had that. But I don't think I've ever had anybody say, wow, you're golden admin material. I don't think that's ever happened to me.
So do you think, like, I think all 3 of us, this is not a new question to us about making this decision about, do we go forward? Are we happy where we are? What is the weight of that decision? Like, it seems to me that maybe the 3 of us are doing the slow Band-Aid pull to make this decision. Do we need to just rip the Band-Aid off? I mean, I've had since 2008, and I still am waffling. It's the enormity of is it the enormity of the job? Is it the change to our lives? Like, what is it that is holding us where we are? What is the weight of this decision on us personally?
For me, it's totally a lifestyle change. Like, as a teacher, I know what my parameters are, right? I know what works for me. I know where, because I'm skilled at being a teacher. I understand the role. It works well with the current life I'm living. And so I was actually thinking about this before we came on. For me to put my mind in a space where I'm going to apply, I have to be all in. I can't be, this is something I learned from a principal many years ago. I can't be like, I'm just going to try it and see what happens. No, if I do it, it's because that's what I intend to do. I'm going to put everything I have into it. And I think that my worry or my concern is just that I don't know how it will fit. I don't know how things will change. And I know things will change because I see what principals do. I see that they have to stay after school for a variety of things. They are responsible for different things. Their job, there's no real start and stop. They're always on. And some could argue teachers are the same, but for me, like, I can turn it off. And I know some principals have said to me, you can do that too as a principal. They're like, you think I don't turn it off sometimes? I'm like, well, yeah, but if you get a call, you got to flip it right back on. There's no, I'll get to that on this day. Like, you have to deal with what comes your way. And as a teacher, it doesn't work like that. So I'm a little bit... that I don't know how it's going to work with my family. And I've said this before, it's a family decision at my house. And I think my wife knows, like, she said to me, we had a conversation, and she said, well, there's no way you're going to be in the classroom at that point. You're going to be a principal. And I was like, it was one of those things where I looked at her strangely, like, what do you know that I don't? She's like, I know that you've been working towards it for a long time. It's eventually going to happen. And so for me, it's a slow Band-Aid release. Now, like I said, I've reached out to a few people, so I'm stepping towards it. I'm saying to people, can I please have some of your time to talk seriously about this? And I think by doing that, I'm ripping that Band-Aid off because I'm starting to accumulate information. I'm starting to prepare myself mentally, because it's not just me and my wife. It's me, my wife, and my kids. And And Chris knows. Anybody who knows me knows I do a lot of things with my boys. I like to take them places and do things with them. I don't want to be absent. And so I worry that I may become somewhat absent here and there. And maybe that's just how it goes. It's part of moving into admin. Other people tell me you're thinking too much. You just do it and you go with the flow and you live your life. Have some faith, they tell me. They're like, have some faith, brother. Believe that you're moving in a direction that the universe wants you to move in.
I feel like we're circling back to that whole self, being able to bring your whole self to the role. And the whole self just isn't you. It's the other components that kind of make you whole, right? And you mentioned family. It's so important to sort of see them as becoming, part of the process too. Like, where are they going to be in it? Where are you going to be in it? I've got a lot of little random pieces. At the heart of it, I've accepted the journey of learning about becoming an administrator. And it's the switch in my brain was, as I mentioned before, I've always been an observer of leaders and always tried to kind of distill some of the things that they did, try and, get some takeaway, pack it up, check it out, look at it the next day, sort of observe it away from people that I respect and people that I respect that have cool and interesting leadership abilities. And I also, second to that, I'm also an apprentice at heart. So I know that once I sort of do my observation stage, I do like to have very straight up, candid conversations with individuals and tell them directly, I'd like to learn from you. I want to learn more from you. I want to be able to discuss the challenges that you go through. I want to present some of my ideas. I want to be able to kind of spitball and brainstorm with you. So accepting my journey towards, let's say, any sort of leadership position, since I've always observed leaders, it's funny, I think just more recently, I've started to observe administrators as leaders. Prior to this, I would have been looking at department heads. I would have been looking at committee leadership. I would have been looking at school council, coaching, these other spaces or club leadership. I would have been even looking at student leadership. Like, what are all this sort of like different flavors of leadership, leading groups, connecting with groups, building capacity, building collaborative spaces, all of that stuff I would have been observing. I don't know if before the last couple of years that I really seriously said to myself, oh yeah, I need to start observing sort of like the identified leader of the school, which is, the principal and the two VPs. I had a principal recently say to me when I had mentioned that I was going to take the PQP, I had someone say to me, well, you don't have to be an administrator to be a leader. And it was one of the administrators. And I took that. I mean, I think that's a great place to start in your journey of leadership within schools. Now, the way that it was presented to me, I'll say flat out, it was kind of I didn't take it into a suggestion to me as that I needed to be a part of sort of more committees. And when it was actually mentioned to me, I wasn't quite sure, like it was a little bit abstract to me because the conversation in itself, I was talking about taking the PQPs, and I kind of thought to myself, okay, is that sort of saying, you don't really have to get the PQP in? Or I thought, is it like, Clough, maybe you should really reconsider? To be honest, I didn't spend a lot of time in that space. I just kind of, I noticed it and I kind of moved on. But again, I think that provocation, that leadership opportunity exists within schools is really, really important. I think that as I move forward through this and I try to figure out more, because the thing that I think we were talking about is how do you know when you're ready? And, you've mentioned already, you never really know if you're ready. You just kind of go for it. I love, there was a posted today. I don't know what the guy, that quote, there was a quote that was being pushed around by Cassup. Chids, what's that guy's first name?
Jamie.
Okay, so Jamie Cassup on Twitter was putting out there today talking about how he as a seasoned individual will sort of outwork, outplay, be a more valuable contributor to a school community than any young startup coming in. This was kind of into a response to someone posting they love to kind of bring new fresh blood in all the time. And it brought to mind some of my colleagues in the PQP1 because some of them are looking to transition right away. And I started to kind of wonder, like, what is it about their confidence? What is it about their confidence that makes them so sure? And I think part of what it was is that they have varied backgrounds of leadership. That's really what it came down to. They had a lot of different places where becoming an administrator formally just kind of fits. It nestles right in with some of those experiences. So I wish I could say the short of it. The weight of it for me is kind of, now I've decided that I'm willing to take on the journey and to really assess my journey in a way of, just like what you were saying, Rolland, you're mentioning the whole, like, you are aware that you're in this space now. And Ramona too, you are aware of your experiences moving into the space now. I think now I'm starting to get nostalgic and trying to see, okay, like, what have my moves been? And am I deserving of this space now? And then I can move forward.
And when I think about the weight of the decision, you know, I'm thinking some of the things that Roland's thinking, I'm thinking some of the things that Chris is saying there, but I'm also thinking about, you know, I've just spent a year as the department head, and we've got 200-ish kids on IEPs, and every day I carried those kids home with me, every day, and it was a heavy load. And then I think, can I take the whole school home with me? And I'm not sure that I can. And that's probably the thing that's holding me back the most. I don't know if I can do it.
I can say that, so my spouse is a VP. She's 2 years into her, she's going to her third year. And I will say that it does happen, but it doesn't, and I can only speak from our experience in our family, and it doesn't happen as often as you might think. There's always, what I've found from observing her process is that there's always some kid or some family or some situation that's kind of on the stove. And then you have a few more that are kind of like stacked up, ready to roll. So you're never without some kids or some families or some staff members that you're working through something. I don't know if that's much different than, for me, I don't know if that's much different than how you kind of stack, because you can only kind of get to one at a time. Yeah, like really, you'd kind of get to one at a time. Sometimes you kind of move the order around depending on which one's more on fire, which one's the one that's kind of needing more attention. But I will say that at least from how I've observed her process is that it does happen. And she does have to work through things, you know, kind of getting up quick from dinner and sort of do a phone call and do an email. But it's also, the thing that I've observed is the intentionality of wanting to work through the process, and then kind of accepting that you do have other people to kind of help you through, means that even if you do carry it home yourself, you're connecting with your team to help you work through it. So you might be on the drive. So the only time you're really by yourself with it, I got to be honest, this is my guess, is probably on your commute. Because you start to work it through with people as soon as you start to connect, right? And in this case, I guess between her and I, it's when, you know, we can kind of connect at the end of the day, and then she connects with her colleagues and such. So you don't hold the ball alone for very long before you're sort of kind of tossing it off to someone to help you out.
And you find your groove. Like, so from the conversations I've had with my principals, who have been very supportive, is they've told me, if you find your way in it, you find your way. So, and I've got principals that have younger families, and I know principals who have older families, and some principals don't even have a family. And it's like, you just find your way. And the principals I have right now, I think it's a real blessing that I'm working with them, because they both understand my world. They both have had children who are older now, who played, you know, minor soccer, minor baseball, minor hockey, competitive sports. And so they understand Like they'll say to me, "Hey, can I talk to you after school?" I'm like, "It's got to be quick because so and so I got to be at such and such at this time. Like I got a jet." And I said, "Obviously, if it's an urgent issue, when I get to where I'm going, I'll call you or you call me. But I can't physically be here past this time. I need to get to wherever." And they're always like, "No, it'll just be 2 seconds," or it'll be, "Hey, my principal's really good at this. Can we talk about such and such? Call me tonight." I'm like, "Right on." And then I'll get to the rink and I'll call him, and he understands because he was me. And so I feel really blessed right now that I've got these two administrators who they look at me, they look at my kids, and they're like, "I remember that. I remember those days. I get it. But your kid," they say to me now, like, "One's going into high school, one's going into junior. You're good. Like, make sure it's good with your wife, talk it over, figure it out, but you're good. Like you're in the last third of your career. Your kids are not so young that they can't deal with themselves for a bit if you need to do something." So it's awesome having that, because if they don't understand me, that's a problem. And one more thing before I let go of the mic is I've said to my principal, what happens if I become a VP and they place me with a principal that doesn't understand my life? And my principal's adamant. He's like, "No, the minute you get placed, the minute you find out where you're going, you make time to speak to your new principal, and you inform your principal, like you talk about your life. This is my life, and I'm here to give you 110% of me, but I have a family and they still require me. And so there are going to be nights or days where I'm leaving at the bell or shortly after the bell because they need me. I need to be with them." He's adamant. You have that conversation and you work it through. You figure it out. And his position is the principals will be supportive of you because now you become a principal. So like you need to work together. You need to be good with each other. That's still a concern for me. I'm going to leave it there for now, but that's the Band-Aid thing too. I become a VP and they say you're going to go work with this person, and I don't know if that person will understand my world, my lived experience. So that's a concern.
Okay, so I want to springboard off that, because being able to share who you are and share elements of whatever your whole self being at work. I like the somewhere between Chids, you saying, will the new leader kind of get me, and where Ramona was saying, I'm losing it. Where Ramona, you said, having to carry the sort of the burden home, sort of like the I put out that survey last week asking about the tap, and if it had been mentioned to you before, I wish I could probably find out. I forget the wording of it. It was basically asking out there if you've ever been told by someone that you should become admin. And it was I thought there was a lot of great chatter there. But some of the things that kind of popped up in it connect to kind of where, like I said, the space between your two statements. One of the things that came up in observing the different answers, and this is a little bit of the, let's say it seems to be connected with the dark side of becoming admin, was there were quite a few comments in there about, I don't want to become like that person or that type of leadership. There was sort of like a bit of an outsourcing of, I'm going to say a little bit of outsourcing of responsibility, maybe agency, that once you decide to go down a leadership path, that you're going to become something that you won't like anymore, or potentially other people won't like anymore. And I'm aware of this kind of phenomenon. There is in some, I've worked in a few different schools now, and there is mixed perceptions of the leader and the person who's the leader. Like, it's almost like there's different camps of how that person is perceived, that vice principal or that principal. Now, some of the chatter that, again, kind of tipped on the dark was about talking about individuals that felt like they had been treated poorly by admin. And it got me really thinking about, well, one, about the brand, just the brand in general. Like when you talk about becoming an administrator, what is some of the baggage that comes along with that? Like what do you have to be prepared to kind of like the grind you have to eat in the first little while to kind of establish who you are? And maybe you're different, and maybe you've got a different style, and maybe you can sort of be your whole self. The other part, though, it got me thinking about is that it seemed from some of the responses, and this wasn't the way I asked the question, but it just got me thinking about how looking at leadership as a principle isn't seen in the same lens as leadership, like a committee leader or a chair of school council or a department head or a lead teacher. Like there isn't a continuum there, because I've so rarely ever seen broad brushed statements about lead teachers or head teachers for departments in the same way that I've heard about administrators. And some people were kind of quick to say, well, they kind of said this all happened in the Harris years, and when they were pulled from the union. Okay. But I wonder what else is going on here. And this is one of the things that really, it is a concern of mine, that you have to scrub your entire community in order to become an administrator, that could potentially have to walk away from individuals that you've worked closely with for some time. And not to say that I would, but you're now kind of on the other side of the fence. And again, it's a perception. I guess there's a reality. You're management. You're running the school now. But it was interesting to observe that. And the strongest thing here is that my strongest takeaway from this was really that someone that is interested in becoming an administrator, it isn't necessarily looked at in the same continuum as someone that wants to lead the equity committee, or somebody that wants to become the literacy teacher in a school, or someone that wants to become a department head. All of those seem to be acceptable forms of leadership without sort of tripping any like us and them figure. Not VPs and not principals. I don't know if that's the same at elementary, but I've experienced that kind of thinking multiple times within secondary. What do you two think?
Well, let's start with the obvious. Once you become an administrator, there's a power differential that exists, and you can't ignore that. So I don't know what it's like to be department head. I don't work in high school, but I could imagine that if I was a high school teacher, my department head can't treat me or deal with me the same way that my principal can. I think a department head is still in the teacher union, and therefore you're still on par. You're still a teacher. But once you become an administrator, you're not a teacher anymore. And there's a power differential. And I think that power differential can cause problems. So from my perspective is, am I going to change? Probably, because now I'm making decisions, or I'm responsible for decisions being made. And so I would like to think that decisions will be made, things will be dealt with based on what I value as a leader and what we have agreed upon as a school community with respect to how we're going to operate as professionals with our community, our parents, our students, our church, because I'm in a Catholic system and that's part of the equation. So first of all, the power differential is huge. It's going to shift. And we've talked about this before. My principal is my principal. And so if I see him on a Saturday watching a hockey game at somebody's place, that's the time to hang out and watch a hockey game. But the minute we get back to work and my principal asks me to do something or is instructing me on something, we're not in the basement watching the hockey game anymore. It's my principal talking to me. So for me as a teacher, I see those two sides and I see the line. And I do my best not to play on that line. And I've said to my vice principal, because I've known my vice principal for many years, we took PQP Part 2. We were in the same course and we did some leadership discernment courses together That's where I met her years ago. And there have been times when I've been talking to her and I'd say to her, are you talking to me right now as my vice principal or my buddy? Because I can't tell and I need to know. Because what you're asking me to do, if you're asking me as my administrator, we have a problem. Because there's some things you're not considering that I am, because I'm not an administrator. But if you're asking me as your buddy to help you out with something, that's a whole different situation. But they can do that. Teachers, I think it's harder for teachers to walk into the principal's office and talk as a buddy when they're talking to their boss. So the power differential is huge. It changes everything. Personally, I know where the line is, and I just don't step over it. I just don't, because I'm just not going to do that. But I do think there has to be changes. You can't. Of all the principals I've worked for and the ones I can call my friends, I have seen times where they have had to be a principal. There was no negotiation in how things were going to proceed in the school for whatever the issue was, what the context was. There was no question. They had to make a decision. Not everybody's going to be happy with the decision for whatever reason, whatever vested interests you have. They make the decision. They have to be good with that. So for me, I enter into administration. My idea is to build relationships with people and to do everything I can to support people. But I'm pretty sure that I'm gonna have to say something or do something at some point that's gonna get in somebody's way. And I'd like to think that it's not done aggressively or with malintent, but feelings get hurt. People think certain things and other things happen. Like, it's happened to me, but I'm at the point now where it's like, well, that's what happens. That's what leaders do, bosses do. Things have to work a certain way. So I think, as if I'm working with you two and one of you is a school council chair, you don't really have power over me the same way that a principal does. So we're still in the same realm. We're still in the same realm. A literacy teacher I've worked with numeracy coaches. They are teachers just like me. They've got lots of experience and understanding in mathematics that I don't. And so they are leaders to me. But if they tell me you should try this, and I'm like, yeah, that's not jiving with me or what I'm about, I can dismiss that. I don't have to live by that. But when my principal says to me, this is what I saw, explain it to me. If they're not satisfied with it, they can say, well, you should really rethink this. This isn't part of like what we're trying to do here. I really think this is how you should be approaching this. They can do that. But the numeracy teacher can't. Neither can the literacy teacher. They can try, but I don't have to. It stays here, equal. But once that power over, it's a different story. If I don't do what I'm told, there could be a problem there. That's where I'm at with your question.
Yeah, it's. I think that's why generally, at least in my experience, when you become an admin, you're moved schools, right? You're not in your own school because the folks in your own school are still going to see you as a teacher, even though you've moved into that admin position. And ultimately, the buck does stop with you.
I've actually seen it where they promoted teachers in the school to vice principal in the school. I've seen it. It's rare in my board, but it has happened. And it's always interesting. There's always like, hey, how's it going over there? Because 1 minute your teaching partner, the next minute your teaching partner is your vice principal. It takes a special person, I think, to navigate that. I do. And even I think to myself, if I became a vice principal and they just left me where I was, I'd be like, can you please move me somewhere else? Like, I don't even know the role yet. Mm-hmm. And now I'm going to be doing TPAs of the people down the hall that I used to plan with. Like, it's kind of surreal, and I guess I'd have to pull up my socks and just do it. But that'd be a great learning experience. I'd have to figure that one out fast, because there's no time to walk in the next day and waffle. There's no time to waffle, because they're going to be coming to me and they're going to be like, you're the vice principal. This is my situation. And I'm like, okay, vice principal hat is on. Let's do this. And lean on my relationships. Use those positive relationships I have with those people to say to them, like, come on, I know what you're like. I know what you're about. You're good at this. Or, hey, you can take the risk here. I've seen you take risks before. We've done it together and you've been fine. Right? So it's like, you use that stuff. You use the positive relationships to continue to build capacity and remain humble. Like, hey, I'm your VP, but I just walked in. I'm sitting in the chair. It's still warm from the last person. Like, let's do this together. Don't come at me and attack me. I'm not going to attack you. Let's work together to make this better, whatever this is. But that would be, thinking about it, sitting here right now talking to you two, freaks me out.
Someone that jumped into the chat that followed the survey just around the TAP and, mentioned that, because it was in that chat that some of the conversation around this, you're just going to become this unlikable person, or this person. I don't want to become that person. Like, somehow the role turns you into it. One of the counter thinking statements was, the thing that has to remain at the center is that you keep it student centered. And that's both a very powerful provocation. It's also a little bit of it can be a really abstract conversation if someone is upset about, how they've been scheduled, or that, they've had a conversation about coming in a couple minutes late. There's a pattern of lateness, let's say. So when you shift from leader to manager, keeping the student at the center of it, I think it becomes a little bit more abstract. Like, if you're talking to a teacher and you're saying, okay, whatever the process is, we need to have a conversation about your attendance. I have noticed that you are coming in 15 minutes late every single day. How do you then bring that back to student-centered? Right? And I'm not saying I'm not down for the challenge, but if that is the challenge, to keep that at the center of every single conversation, wow. Like, it makes me think I still don't have enough experience to sort of sit in that space, despite the fact I've spent X number of years around students. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's part of what I still have to learn. Whew.
What are your thoughts about that, Ramona? The student, is that when Chris says that comment that was made on Twitter, how does it resonate with you? If you're an administrator and you have to deal with the situation, if you center it student-centered, does that help you? Or how do you feel about that?
I think I'm probably going to agree with Chris that there are situations where it's the decision is easy to make when it's student-centered, but there are certain things that it's very tough to bring back to where's the student-centered piece of this. I guess I'm thinking more facilities. It's very tough. The door is broken. The door is broken. Like, how do I guess maybe I could take it to safety, I guess. I don't know, but I'm just having a hard time. Not everything can be brought back to putting the student at the center of that.
I kind of lean in like along the same way as you, is that sometimes I get what Chris is saying and what that person's comment was. I get it. But I don't know, maybe there are times where it has nothing to do with students. And if you try to make it about students, that might be inauthentic. It might be inauthentic the way it's presented. And I don't know about you two, but there's nothing worse than sitting down with your principal and they're coming at you with something and they framed it a certain way and that that's not legit. I don't know if that's ever happened to you. It's happened to me where I'm like, are you kidding me? Why are you framing it that way? Can you just spit it out? What's the problem? What's the issue? Which sucks, because I've not had a lot of those conversations, But when they happen, it's like, are you really using that to get to this? I get why they're doing it, but I don't appreciate it at all. It doesn't help with my relationship with that individual. Not at all. So I do believe, like, based on my personality, I do believe that sometimes you have to have that hard conversation, and there might not be a lot of entry points into it. That there just might not be. And I think if you have somewhat of a relationship, it can work. Like, I think of myself one time, my principal had an issue with something that I wasn't doing. It wasn't anything major. He just said to me, "Hey, when you do this, can you do this first?" And I was bothered. Like, I was so disappointed in myself because I had such respect for him, such esteem for his leadership and how he treated me and my family. He knows my family, and I was like, "I'm really sorry." And he's like, "Why do you look like you're devastated? It's not a big deal. I just need you to do it because it helps with efficiency or whatever in the office." I'm like, "I'm bothered that I upset you." He's like, "Dude, I'm not upset." And then there's other times, like this other example where the guy's telling me there's a situation. I'm like, "Why are you framing it like that? Why don't you just come out and say it? Because what you're doing here is you're not building relationship, you're breaking it."
Yeah. Yeah. I remember a situation where a principal kind of came at me, was trying to make it student-centered, but it had nothing to do with the student. And it really had nothing to do with me. And we talk about, emotional bank accounts. And that day she completely emptied my emotional bank account with her, probably for the rest of our relationship. And I think that those are the situations where, they're trying to, how do I put this? It was trying to bring it back to student centered, but it wasn't. It was a staffing issue. It was not a student issue. And that was what made it even harder for me to stomach at that moment, was that you were trying to make it a student issue and it was not. And
So you could feel that it wasn't authentic.
yeah.
I think sometimes it's, and I could be wrong. Maybe people don't like this or appreciate this, but my gut tells me that sometimes you just have to say to that person, "Listen, I want to talk to you about something. It's not going to be easy for me to talk about, but it's got to be talked about. And this is what the issue is." And I think if you do it with an open heart and open ears, and try not to judge, but try to present the situation, and then have the person speak to it, or they can have time to consider it and come back and talk about it. I think if you do it that way, like, that will help me sleep better at night, right? So if I have to have that hard conversation and I don't have a lot of entry points into it, then I could just say, "Listen, I'm going to tell you something. This is what I have to talk to you about, or this is what I want to talk about." And I've never appreciated a principal not giving me think time. So I would, it depends on the situation, right? Because there could be a number of different situations. But if it's not a situation that's like truly like crazy or a problem with the college of teachers or whatever, then it's just, this is what's happening. And I really, from my perspective, I don't think it should be happening, or we need to change something. Think about it, come back, talk to me about it, but it needs to be addressed. Like, we need to deal with this now. I think for me, if I'm going to do that, if I'm going to have that hard conversation, then I need to do it in a way that's as authentic as possible, whether it's going to upset the person or not. It needs to be authentic so that I can be like, okay, did I live by my values? Did I live by my professional philosophy of leadership and education? If the answers are yes, then it's like, okay, well, I guess you're going to be mad at me, but I can't operate in a way to make sure nobody's going to be upset. That's just not going to happen. I've seen people try, and I've never seen it work. So if you two or anybody listening knows how to make that happen, hit me up. I'd love to hear it, because, as much as some people think I like conflict, I don't particularly like conflict. I think the problem is that when I enter into conflict, I try to own it. I try to own it, right? Like, what I mean by own it is I get dirty with it. I'll get into it if you want to have a conflict. I'm not just going to sit back and be torn apart. I'm gonna fight. I don't mean that in a negative way either. I just mean I'm going to engage. I'm not going to run away. And when you're a principal, there's no running. Like, you have to deal with what comes your way. You can't go anywhere. You need to deal with it. And you need to remember that that person works down the hall, and that you may be working with this person for years. So relationship is important, but I think, and student centered is obviously important because that's why we're all there. But we can't forget the humans. We can't forget that you're going to have hard conversations. And I've been told by a retired principal that his issue with hard conversations is they always seem to be top down, right? That's a whole other thing we could talk about. How do you deal with people coming to you with an issue from bottom up with your style or your decisions? How do you deal with that? I don't know. But I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to take that on at this point in my career.
It was said to me at the tail end of PQP1, we were chatting about just this exact topic about making the hard decisions, having to sort of, one of the students had to sort of drop the hammer on a decision. Like, you have to sort of kind of be hard, knowing when to be hard, knowing when to be soft, knowing when to sort of support, when to push, when to pull, all this kind of still sort of metaphorical edubabble in a lot of ways. And someone in the group said, you really do have to do some work on learning how to lead adults, because everything that we do is about leading children, and we move into positions of leadership using similar tools, it feels like. And the student kind of said, I feel like there's an area of leading adults that just isn't talked about quite openly or clearly. Like, the guy said, I don't feel like I have access to what it means to lead adults inside of an educational system. And, seeking out those tools strikes me as really important, because I feel like one of the things we keep circling around is agency here, and adults being able to have adult relationships. And what does that mean? And how do you manage those? And how do you support those? And how do you when there's a line there, and everyone has their sort of responsibilities to take care of. Everyone has their own work. But yeah, doing some work to develop your leading adults leadership skills. And I think that probably the skill set's different, because if you've ever been sitting across from a leader in any measure, and you get this sudden sense like, damn, they're talking to me like I'm a student. Like, you get set on fire right away, right? So how do you avoid that? And part of it too is also, I think we've all gotten used to being talked to like we're students and adults at the same time. I mean, any PD session that you feel like that is just being presented to you and you're going over and over and over, like the stuff that we have to do. This is the operating system of education, but you're thinking like, man, like, do they not know I could just read this on my own time? Like, so you're expressing from a position of an adult, but you're being taught like you're, a teenager or elementary student, let's say. And so, yeah, spending some time in that space. That's all I got.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
So, have we done it?
Have we worn ourselves out for the evening? Are we done?
I think we're good.
I'm good.
We talked about some like heavy duty stuff that I don't know about the two of you, but I haven't had a conversation like this in a while.
It's good.
Thumbs up to the people who were able to step in and watch. I know Craig Bell, who's a vice principal with the Waterloo Regional School Board here. He jumped in. He checked us out and tweeted us a bit about his thinking about our thinking, which is really awesome. We've had other people jump in, and we've had viewers check it out. So hopefully they'll reach out, or if not, that's cool too. I mean, it's nice to know people are listening, and hopefully our conversation is helping other people with their discernment around leadership, or they're checking it out. There's an interest there. I appreciate the two of you being vulnerable and sharing your thinking with me. I'm feeling like this is wild, because this doesn't happen. I've talked about the internet before and how awesome it is. I know that I've never had two other people like do this in the way we're doing it. It's always either face to face for 30 minutes after school or after a committee meeting or something. But we're purposefully, talking about our process to leadership. And it seems like we're all kind of on the doorstep. It's just a matter of working out a few things to take the next step. And even if we don't, that's okay. But it's valuable to break this down. Like, just talking to the two of you tonight, I feel like I'm a little bit more comfortable with where I'm coming from, right? And obviously there's room to grow depending on the system I work in and what the values are and what the mission and vision is and how that plays out over the years. But I feel like I have a good grasp of the reason why I want to go into it. And I think I can bring a skill set, and I can bring a human relationship piece to it that would be valuable. So that's good, because you got to feel confident about who you are. And I think I'm that part of me is running smoothly at the moment. And I think that's important for me. Whether the system sees it as valuable or not is valuable to me. So thanks to the two of you for that.
You're welcome.
Any final words from either one of you before we shut this one down?
I appreciate you both. I appreciate your sharing, and I appreciate the conversation. And I appreciate you going over time to continue it.
Yeah, I would agree to sort of make we have taken advantage of the opportunity now to have this conversation, knowing full well that when we get into September, we may not have the same sort of luxury to push to an hour and a half. So if we're getting the talk out now, it's good to have it on record, and it's good to have it out there for other individuals to be able to share in. And I did appreciate Craig on Twitter. He had mentioned these are the types of discussions that rattle around in his head and were rattling around in his head when he was, going through the process and considering becoming an admin. So he mentioned that there's value in candidates or people that are thinking about leadership positions to check out our discussion. So kudos to Craig. And as you both said, thanks for sharing. Thanks for Karen. I was going to try and figure out a third rhyme, but I can't do it. I'm all out of poetry at this point.
Until next time, talk me through your process, and feel free to take me to your leader.
Yeah, sure. So you can connect with us. We are on Podbean now. We're also on iTunes. So talk me through your process. Anyone listening, please use the hashtag your process. You got at Archids, you got at Ramona Maharg, and you got me at Chris Cliff. And yeah, like you said, looking forward to episode 3.
Right on. Have a good night, you two.
Good night, guys.
See ya.